Thanks, PT. With me now is Chloe Reuter, founder of Reuter PR, a luxury communications firm in Shanghai, Gary Rosen, a former senior VP of Global Operations at Intercontinental Hotels Group, and Pierre Gervois, President and CEO of China Elite Focus. Pierre, where are Chinese travelers going today, and where's the next hot destination?
Well, the next hot destination is definitely the United States, and New York being the favorite destination of the new generation of wealthy Chinese tourists. They want out to spend a lot of money on luxury stores on Fifth Avenue, then they want to take a private jet to go to gamble in Vegas. And over the last year, the United States were considered as a difficult destination because of visa issues. But now the US government has a more smoother policy for tourist visa for Chinese people. And there will be an increase in the coming months of the number of wealthy Chinese coming to the US.
Do you see other countries actually following the US as well then?
Yes, the other country is the UK. Because British luxury brands are doing very well on the Chinese market. So the UK, and especially London, will have a surge with Chinese tourists. And I would say France is steady with Chinese tourists. But the two fastest growing markets for Chinese tourists are the US and the UK.
How are luxury retailers adapting to this influx of travelers?
I think you're right. There are an awful lot of tourists going to Europe with a view to buying luxury products. And I think you're seeing some very good examples. If you look at Harrods, they've actually bought in 75 Union Pay machines so that people can just use their own local card and get money out. And they've got about 80 Chinese-speaking staff. So they're really encouraging Chinese luxury shoppers. And you've got the same thing going on in France, Galeries Lafayette, and even individual stores, Louis Vuitton and all those are also bringing in the Chinese-speaking staff. So that's definitely a bonus, but I think they can do a lot more.
Have you seen any retailers doing something special and above and beyond those, the few tips that you've mentioned?
Well, you do have the ones who are scheduling sort of VIP visits around the stores. They might be bringing in an artisan from Hermès to show people how the Birkin's actually made. And I think if you can tap into that, wish that Chinese people have to feel extra special, to have an experience which money almost can't buy, then I think you're onto a winner.
And how important is it for the Chinese travel agency or the groups that are working here with the travelers to this whole experience?
Well, I think it's very interesting, but I also think what we have to say today is that we're talking about luxury or Chinese travelers, but they're very different. They're the people who have already been out of China a number of times, and they're definitely more sophisticated in terms of the experience they're looking for. So they're not particularly interested in going on a tour bus and then being taken to the outlets in Tuscany maybe. They would actually like the one-on-one experience. So I think whatever we discuss, we need to be careful that we're talking about whether it's the new traveller or whether it's, as Pierre was saying, the very sophisticated one who's looking for the private jet to Las Vegas.
So Gary, for global tourism companies, what's something that they don't really get about the Chinese traveler right now?
Well, I'm not sure that it's not necessarily that they don't get. I think it's really what it is they're not educated yet. And I think that this is one of the most important things that from the travel industry perspective and the hotels can do. Especially is understand. I mean, these are travelers. They may not be as seasoned as those coming potentially when you talk about coming from other parts of Asia into the United States or into Europe. But I think what they need to do is understand the cultural differences. The most important thing that the hotels need to be thinking about is understanding and tapping into the cultural differences and ensuring that they understand the whys, what's important to these Chinese travelers, and be able to accommodate that.
Have you seen any examples of outstanding demonstrations of this understanding and adaptation yet?
I have to say, from this standpoint, I haven't seen what I would define as great. I think people are starting to dabble. And I think you have that from all segments of the luxury. I don't think that people really have tapped into the understanding of what's important to the Chinese consumer traveling abroad. And I think that it's not something that they can't do. They certainly can, and they have with other cultures that have been new to the markets, whether you talk about the Japanese market or you talk about the Brazilian market. I mean, all of these were developing at some point, and it's just China is the same. The difference is just the size and the sheer quantity of those Chinese travelers now traveling abroad.
And the World Tourism Organization estimates that over 100 million Chinese will be traveling outside of the country annually by 2020. How is this going to change the world tourism landscape?
It will be a major change. It will completely change the face of tourism, and specifically in the luxury travel tourism. One of the first things will be human resources. When we talk with hotel chains and luxury retailers, they are now hiring a lot of Chinese-speaking person, and that will be a big change in human resources. And also for hotels, there is a big cultural change with the food issue. We have a couple of clients who are five-star hotels in, let's say, in Paris. And these hotels have 3 Michelin star chefs. And when they talk with us, they say to us, please do your advertising campaign and explain that we have a 3-star Michelin chef. And I told them, the wealthy Chinese customer, he may be in the presidential suite at $20,000 per night, but he will request to eat instant Chinese noodle in his room, and he won't like at all your French chef with 3-star Michelin. And it's quite difficult to make them understand, but I'm sure it will take a couple of years.
What about in terms of, you talk about language being so critical. I mean, at some point, they're going to have to import more and more Chinese staff and Chinese native-speaking workers. I mean, is this going to be an issue in terms of working and clashing potentially with actually the domestic workforce and things like that?
I think it may be true, but more and more Western professionals in hospitality industry do learn Chinese Mandarin. So they will have to import workforce from China, but not entirely.
But they can already do simple things. For example, there's such a missed opportunity when hotels are not translating menus. That's so easy. Or websites. I mean, if you imagine that 400 million people are on the internet in China, and if you look at how people are booking these holidays, once they've been out with the big tour bus, they come back to China, they may want to go again, and that's when they go onto the internet and they want to book it themselves. And there's a missed opportunity for, you know, almost a huge portal which assembles all the news so that people know which hotel they should be going to in Paris. Because at the moment, if you ask people, they spend hours, if not days, searching for information about where they want to go. And who's tapping into the shopping? No one's telling these people, okay, this is absolutely, you know, here's your app for where you need to go shopping in Paris. So it's all about thinking towards the young generation of Chinese travelers and how they're using technology and tapping into that. And there's so many missed opportunities.
I think you're making a great point, because I think the reality is the ones that are going to win, especially in the luxury sector, are the ones that know how to be proactive, and the ones that are not afraid to take that step forward. I think a lot of times that you see in the hospitality industry are those that actually it's more reactive, and really that sense of me too, or I need to catch up. And the ones that really are going to win, at least from what I've seen from my experience, are those that are actually taking that step forward, being proactive, making the initiative to really understand and be able to solve some of those undefined issues that potentially, and we know that people have today, coming from China, going out to other countries around the world.
So when you talk about missed opportunities, I mean, another way to look at it is if the China boom is real and it's going to be sustainable, who stands to get rich from this? Aside from, you know, the obvious ones, the airlines and the hotels, what other new services and what other new businesses do you see sort of popping up that can really benefit from this huge influx?
I think that will be mostly luxury retail. We had a statistic from the US Department of Commerce. On average, a Chinese tourist in the US spends $6,000 in shopping during his stay, which is a huge amount because it's on average. And we had statistics from the China UnionPay card, which is operated in the United States by Discovery Financial Services Network. And we had access to some stats, and it's amazing how much Chinese tourists spend in jewelry stores. It can be $50,000, $100,000. And I think the big winner in the travel industry won't be necessarily hospitality industry or airlines, but retail industry. And retailers, they invested a lot to open new stores in China. But I think they didn't anticipate the fact that now the wealthy Chinese customers, they don't want to buy in Shanghai. They can afford to go to New York, to London or to Paris to buy the real stuff with the real service. And it causes a lot of perturbation in the mind of luxury brands now.
And do you think they have an inherent advantage in some sense because obviously they innately understand the Chinese culture, the language, customs and things like that?
Yes, let's take the example of the Shangri-La Hotel. They have just opened in Paris a magnificent hotel, Shangri-La Hotel Paris, in a premium location. And all other luxury hotels in Paris are really scared. They don't dare to say openly that they're scared by the Shangri-La because they say, oh, it's a brand new hotel and our hotel has 100 years history. It's maybe true, but in terms of service, the Shangri-La knows exactly how to talk to wealthy Chinese travelers, what kind of food they expect, what kind of service they expect. So I think Chinese brands with a lot of quality, a lot of content, will really have big success expanding abroad.
But I'd say, so just let's not forget that for the majority of these travelers, they don't actually want to spend much money on what they consider as just a bed. They would actually much rather stay in the equivalent of a 7 days inn. I think if they opened in Europe, they'd probably do really well. And they would rather save that money and then spend it on shopping. So I think we're again talking about a very small segment of travelers. And I think that...
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think, from the luxury standpoint, again, we have China, which is still, again, from a developing market standpoint, it is very image conscious in terms of the luxury sector. And they do want to say, so you do have that finite perspective of that upper echelon of the industry that's traveling outbound that wants to be able to come back and say, I stayed at, the 6-star hotel in Dubai. I stayed at the best hotel in New York. Because that's part of who I am and defines me as where my standing is back in China. But I think to your point that the broader sector you have to understand where their price value is and their value equation. How much do they place on that place that they're staying? How important is it for the brand, or do they want to spend money?
And do you see actually, that's interesting, I mean, those two segments, do you see the currently larger one actually shrinking over time as sophistication gets higher? And in fact, perhaps some of the luxury retailers within China react and they do something about, for example, the pricing gap and things like that, that are actually forcing people to even, I mean, they were originally looking to Hong Kong, but now obviously looking further abroad. I mean, do you actually see that segment shrinking while the other segment, which is looking more for experiential luxury, growing?
I think over time, I think again, when you look at the broader sector of the travel industry for China outbound, you are going to look for more of those people that are going, when you think about the travel patterns, they travel first within China, then they travel around Northern Asia, then they go to Southern Asia and into Australia, then they go to Europe, and then they may venture to the United States. I mean, from that standpoint, you will start to see that grow further and further and further, and so that middle sector is going to grow, no doubt. And so there's no question that it will at some point overshadow. But again, there's going to be the diversity of that higher echelon piece and then the mass.
And I think another missed opportunity, since we're also on that topic, is that the mass, at the moment, the people who are venturing overseas, as Gary says, they tend to be in the wealthier cities in China. So we're looking at first and second tier. However, there are so many people who are starting to move in third, fourth, fifth tier cities, and no one is really tapping into them. No European company, as far as I know, is going to the likes of Shenyang and trying to figure out how to get those people to Europe and how they're going to help. So I think that basically hotel businesses, luxury businesses, and all those people should take a good hard look at Western China and more in those tourists. If you look at the Louvre in Paris, I think about 7 years ago, if you had been a Chinese traveller and you would have gone there, there would have been no leaflets in Chinese, nothing. And now the website's in Chinese, you've got the leaflets, and you're giving those people a much better experience because they can go and they can look at the art and they can learn about it and appreciate it. So I think those are just very good examples of how you can enrich someone's experience.
Chloe, Pierre, Gary, thanks for being on Thoughtful China. That wraps it up for today. You can subscribe to us on Tudo and YouTube, and also follow us on Weibo and Twitter. We'll see you again.